Hey, good morning, everybody. Um, week 5. I don't know how everyone's doing. I feel like everyone's in different places, which is totally fine. Wherever you are is great. I know Faye mentioned yesterday that she is. Are you just cutting out now, Faye?
I am, as we meet, I am cutting out my fabrics, and I am completely in love with this Pathways ruler. It
Oh,
is
good.
it is amazing. I'm about halfway through cutting them out, and once I got the hang of it,
hmm
it's just been so quick.
hmm hmm
So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Um, anyone else want to report on their progress before we get started?
I have all my blocks made.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Yep.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Except I think I'm gonna have to I'll lay them out. I'll have to stop because I've got stuff to make for Christmas all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
3 pairs of pajamas and
Yeah.
yes, and I'm gonna do, of course, Julia and I are doing 2 blocks for the quilt for Maeve.
Mm-hmm.
So gotta get that done. So that'll be the next thing, but I'm gonna get my layout sorted out at least. I might have time to put them together. I don't know.
Awesome. Yeah, it's definitely a very busy time of year to be working on a quilt pre-Christmas.
I have all
Laurel?
that.
Ooh,
Yeah.
nice. That's exciting. Anyone else finish all their blocks?
I have.
Nadia?
Yep.
Janetta?
I've completed mine, but I've gone small.
Oh, that's okay. Melissa,
Yeah.
how many did you decide to do?
I think it's going to be 6 across or 3 across and 3 down. So it's whatever. Let me do that again. Six
Yeah,
across and 6 down. So
6 by
36.
6.
Yeah, 6 by 6.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
That's great. That's a nice size.
yeah.
Sandra, you've got yours done?
Mine is done.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
done,
Wow.
done.
It's all piece. It's all piece.
Wow.
That's
That's
great.
great.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Lovely
Yeah.
colors.
Yeah. Yeah. I primarily one
My baby.
quarter bundle, and then I just added a few other black and whites, and yeah, I'm really happy. It turned out fantastic. I call it a maximalist quilt because I just did another maximalist quilt, and it's just using all of these patterns and colors and putting it all together, and it all works out in the end.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. That's awesome. Thank you.
And
That's super good.
I actually had Jacqueline Sava to our quilt guild on Thursday, so she asked me to bring it to show people because she was talking about the book and she was talking about silk and flatter, and so I
Okay.
actually wanted to display it to the guild.
Oh, that's
Yeah, so
awesome.
that was nice.
That's very timely.
Yeah, yeah.
Perfect. Great. So we've got a bunch of people who finished their blocks, a bunch of people who've, I know that there's a few people in the group who've already put their quilt tops together. Mary, how are you doing with yours? Oh, sorry, I can't. Yes. Yeah, Mary. Is there more than one? Oh, there's Mary Sutton. So the other Mary, sorry. I don't know if maybe you're still muted, Mary. Or I'll come back to you maybe. I can't hear. I think now you are actually muted.
No, now you can
Oh,
hear
there.
me.
Yes.
Sorry, I was hooked into my phone with my earpods and the microphone. Yeah,
Yeah,
it goes in. Sorry about that.
that's okay.
I think I have about 60 squares done. I think we're
Oh,
measuring up pretty good.
nice.
It's Yeah, I didn't have much time this week.
Yeah.
I'm just a little more anxious about, and I'm sure we'll get there.
Sure.
The actual quilting part of it, and
Mm.
what that's gonna look like for someone like myself.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, don't worry too much about that. I think, um, yeah, I think there's definitely a bunch of strategies that you can use. And, you just choose something really simple. You don't have to do anything too complicated as well. So I can definitely talk
I
about
think that's, yeah, for my first quilt. I think, yeah, I
Yeah.
guess it's straight lines kind of idea. Maybe the
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. They could be on an angle, like, they don't have to be like, perpendicular, horizontal, but, yeah, I would definitely do something, that's going to just get you through it, and give you the experience without having to, stress about, doing like a design, like a complicated design of any kind.
Yeah. Is there, I haven't Googled or, gone on
Mhm.
YouTube or anything, but like, is there a good resource, say, for some of these maybe linear quilting patterns?
Yeah. So, I might need a minute to think of her name, but there's, a quilter. She's done 2 different books called Walk and then like Walk 2.0 or something. Jackie Gearing, I think. Oh, do you have that there, or do you have Sandra? I can't. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Canadian Melissa Marginette from Manitoba.
Oh,
She's
okay.
she's got 2 books. They're all about walking foot quilting design. I've used them quite a bit because my free motion skills aren't very good, even though I try. But lots of different designs of block patterns. Well, I guess we're not really looking at borders on this type of quilt because it's a modern quilt. But
Yeah.
but there's all sorts of, you can go extreme, like here's like here's spider web and
Okay.
like that. But you can also go, ripple, like this is a good one, ripple. So you don't have to be so worried
So it's
about,
like a bit
meandering
wavy.
different lines. Yeah.
Mhm,
So there's
mhm.
lots of great ideas there. This one's a little bit more advanced, the second book that she's come out with. But it's
Mhm.
always great to support another Canadian. So
That's amazing. Do you
yeah.
mind writing her name in the chat? Oh, I can't
Yeah.
see anything.
And
Yeah, it's kind of hard.
sorry,
Yeah, no problem.
can I just ask again?
Of course.
So when you talk about walking foot, that's like just a regular kind of sewing machine, just a foot,
Yeah. So it's just an
It's a-
attachment for your sewing machine. So we
or
can
a
talk-
regular sewing machine.
Yeah. Yeah. So we
Yeah,
can talk about that.
okay.
I mean, I don't know if I have one. I might have one handy here. One sec.
I find that the bar that comes off the quilting foot is also really helpful if you're doing straight lines at making, because you can set that bar to like whatever distance you want it to be. And then each run of your line, that bar will sit on your last row of stitches. And so you'll get the same measurement as you go.
I have not ever had great luck with that tool. I found that my bar seems to shift a little bit, and so like when I did that for a quilt, I remember, and maybe I just wasn't, maybe it was because it was so long ago, but I found that like my lines just kind of got a little bit wonky over time. Have you had like really good success with that?
Yeah, I have like I have 2 quilting walking feet for different machines. And
Mhm.
one of them, that little bar is a little looser than others.
Right.
And so it has shifted if I've been too saucy with pushing the quilt through the machine. Because at a certain point, I'm just ready to be done.
Sure.
So I get a bit more forceful and fast. But my other one, the bar sits really tightly and does not move. So I guess that's something to think about too.
Okay. Yeah.
Try all the things.
Yeah. So, like this is an example of a walking foot. It's, so it would go on your machine sort of like that. And this little lever is going to sit above the needle bar, the little screw that screws in your needle. And so as the machine's going up and down, this is actually, mechanizing the foot so that it's, moving up and down. So the idea is that it's grabbing, so your feed dogs are moving the fabric underneath, and then the walking foot is grabbing it from the top. So you've got this like double thing. So managing like all of those layers. So people will use the walking foot for quilting, but it's really great if you're doing any kind of sewing with materials that are different textures, so like a leather or something that might be slippery even. So it's just going to help kind of manage everything and grab it from top and bottom, so move it a little bit more evenly. Because what could happen if you quilt a quilt with your regular foot is, because there's the 3 layers, like the bottom's moving and then the top might not be moving at the same rate, so you might get this like sort of pulling, and the lines can get a little bit wonky and weird. So yeah, so that's just usually, that's an extra attachment that you definitely want to get your hands on for the quilting part of it, for sure. But we can definitely come back to talking about that one in the next meeting, and then also like when you're actually at that point as well too. I don't mind doing that. So today I was just going to talk a little bit about putting the quilt top together, especially because some folks have not ever put a quilt top together, and what the assembly process is. There's definitely I sent oh, power just went back on. I sent this week's email very late last night, and I went into a little bit of detail on how a couple different methods on how I like to put the sorry, everything's just beeping and turning itself on. How I like to put the top together. So I oftentimes, we talked about rows versus sort of quadrants, I think in the last meeting. And in the book, we talk about putting it together in rows, which you can do. So just meaning like you're putting like each of these to each other, but I like to put them together in quadrants. But before that, just how you want to maybe organize your layout. I find that if sort of getting a bit of distance from your the layout, like either having it on the floor. Most people don't have like a tabletop surface that's going to be big enough to put your blocks onto, but just sort of playing with the layout options on the floor, taking pictures, and then looking at it. Some people will stand on a chair, to get a little bit more distance even, but just giving yourself a little bit of just distance. And I do find that taking photos sort of brings all the blocks and the colors together in a way that you can sort of see the shapes, in the contrast a little bit better. So trying something, taking a photo, also it's obviously just a really good reference, maybe trying moving some things around, taking another photo, and then just kind of like looking at those to see, because sometimes you can kind of see, oh, that block looks a bit funny, and then maybe you want to twist one particular block, or you notice that you've got a lot of dark blocks in one section and that's not really what you had intended. You want to sprinkle them around a little bit more. I know some people were talking about doing things like an ombre, or like, kind of having your color graduating. So I find that just having sort of having a photo is a really good way to kind of so you can kind of squint your eyes a little bit too, and you can kind of see those, find those little misfit blocks that are maybe not in exactly the right place, and you can kind of shift things around. So that's one of the strategies that I usually use when I'm playing around with my layouts. And then that gives you the option to also go back to a layout that you're like, oh, actually that was the one that I really liked, especially if you're really changing, the positioning, because you're really in charge of how you're also going to position the block. So like, whether you're going to twist your, create more circular shapes, or if you want it to be a little bit more scattered. So because there's no set layout for this particular quilt, and you kind of have the option to kind of do anything that you want, you can definitely try out a few different ways that all of your curves and your circles are coming together or not coming together, and having the photos can take you back a few steps, or go, you can go back and forth between your options a little bit more easily if you've got that photo reference. So I usually will do photos, play around. It's really nice if you have friends around who can give you advice. I always like to do it. It's always fun when you've got someone around who can be like, oh wait, what about that? Like try this, turn this around. But also you can share your photos with your friends too. That's another way to get some feedback on your quilt design. Does anyone have any questions about figuring out their layout, or does anyone have any ideas they wanted to talk about in terms of how they're going to lay out their blocks? It's just kind of a fun thing to play around with. So once you've got all your blocks in, then it's really fun to just lay them out.
Yeah, I would agree. Taking pictures is crucial in terms of determining where your block, how you want to position your blocks throughout. It makes a big, big difference. Now I don't have a wall that I can use as a design wall, but I have
Right.
a portable design wall. So I put that up, lay everything out, and it it was up for a week, and I was shifting things all around. So it does make a big difference.
Right. So that's, I mean, yeah, that's a lot of people don't have the design wall option, but one thing that you can do is a design wall is really just a, sort of a almost like a felted piece of fabric. And so what some people will do is you can get like one of those tablecloths, those sort of felted back tablecloths, those like picnic tablecloths that are like vinyl on one side, but they've got that fuzzy background, fuzzy backside. You can get one of those and hang that up on your wall as like a really inexpensive design wall. So not the kind of design wall that you might get at a quilting shop, and hang that up. And then it is obviously also nice if you have a wall that you can do that, to put your blocks up and then be able to kind of step back, leave it up for a little while. So obviously if you have them on the floor, you're not going to leave them on the floor for a week potentially. And if you have them up on the wall, you could have a little bit more time with them.
One other thing too, when you take a picture,
Mm-hmm.
You go into your edit function and scroll to the black and white. So when you see the picture in black and white, it'll give you a better idea of how the contrast is playing out. Like you were saying, you may have too many darks in one thing.
Yeah.
And you may not always notice the value of how you've put the blocks together. When it's like when you're just looking at a color picture of it. So that's another, I always do that with mine too.
Yeah, that's another good strategy for seeing that contrast very clearly, because you're taking away all the color and you're just seeing the value.
Thanks, Anastasia. That's a super helpful tip for doing this. Karen, I was wondering, the putting together in quadrants versus rows. Do you do quadrants because it's more stable, or does it just keep everything better aligned?
Yeah. So I mean, if you can kind of think, you can definitely do rows, but if you can kind of think you're like creating something that's really long, and the longer it gets, like the potentially more like wiggly it might get. I mean, theoretically your blocks are fairly square, but I just find that if you're putting them into, like, if you're squaring them up into fours, those are a little bit more solid, and then you can put all of those together. But I've definitely done it both ways. It's not wrong, and you can definitely do like a really long row and put them together. But the way that I tend to feel about it is I just feel like it is just I'm making a more solid piece, and then everything, those just kind of connect together a little bit easier. It's definitely simpler to do them in rows. So that's like a simpler, that can be a more sort of simpler way to wrap your mind around it and to assemble it. And so that may make more sense to you in terms of the way that you like to work and the way that your mind works. When you're working in quadrants, that just kind of changes the way that you visualize it. So that may make it, more tricky. So for me, I do tend to do it unless it's just a shorter span, then I might do it in rows that way. I don't think either way is wrong. It's just what maybe feels better. And then I also definitely label my blocks once I've got my layout, and because I'm, once you want to start moving them around and pinning them together, if you have a label on each of your blocks, it makes it just a little bit easier to keep reorganizing them, especially if you are doing them in quadrants. Rows might be a little bit simpler to keep organized. You could just you're just sewing your rows together, but I individually label every single block with washi tape or even just little. I mean, we have tons of little price sticker labels and address labels and things that we use here at the shop. So I've always got those little like white Avery labels around that you can get at Staples, and those peel off. The ones that we like stick on all our fat quarters and stuff. Those are just Avery address labels, and I find those really nice because they easily peel off your fabric, but they stick really nicely. Washi tape or painter's tape is another option. I mean, you can definitely also use regular masking tape. It's a bit more tacky. You just wouldn't want that masking tape to be on your block on the fabric for too long, which I guess just depending on how long your blocks are in progress. You know, sometimes it's a really long time. Like I've got some quilts that are probably labeled from a few years ago that I haven't totally finished putting together. Although that the assembly is not usually where I get stuck with a quilt. It's usually once the quilt top is assembled, then it just kind of goes into a pile that doesn't, where things don't get done. It's usually I'm stuck in the like putting the blocks together or the once the quilt top is done stage. Those are where my works in progress are. I usually move through the putting, once you got the blocks, it's really fun to put the quilt top together. So that usually is not a stalling point for me.
Same.
So from there, once you've got your blocks labeled, then I organize them to sew them together, and I like to sew them together in pairs. So I was saying in my note, you know, I would do like the first, let's see what you can see. So I would start, like I would have all of this laid out, and I would like work through this row. So I would just flip this block over, flip this block over. I would flip all of these blocks over so that they were face to face. Have them all like in a pile, and then I would sort of stick a pin in that side of the pair, and then I would do the same thing. So flip all of these, and then all of these, and then all of these, and then I would just stack them on top of each other. Like once you have them labeled, you can kind of keep them organized, and you don't have to worry too much if they happen to slip out of order. But once you've got them all stacked together, you can just go to your sewing machine. And then I talked about chain piecing, which if you've not done any quilting before, chain piecing is just where you're going to just sew one block after the other without cutting the thread in between. So rather than sew a block, take it away from your machine, cut the thread, you're going to just keep feeding the blocks in one after the other, leaving just a very short little, pull it forward a little bit so that there's a tiny, like maybe an inch of thread in between, and then feed the next block in. So you're just sewing. And the photo that I put in the little email kind of shows kind of a pile of all my blocks kind of like at the end of my machine, because you're just kind of feeding all 40 pairs through sort of in one huge long chain potentially, and then you can cut. So that just saves you a little bit of time, and you can kind of zip through. Whenever you're doing quilting and you're working on lots of pieces, chain piecing is a pretty popular way to just quickly get through all the piecing, you know, the assembly of particular units together, because you may be doing that multiple times for multiple parts of the block, depending on how complex your blocks are. So chain piecing, and then you can snip all of the threads in between, and then start pressing. Does anyone who's never done chain piecing, does that make sense to you, Bridget, Mary?
I just wondered about the quadrant. Like, so do you start with 4 and then you chain sew the groups of 4 together?
So you're gonna start with pairs.
Oh, start with pairs. Okay.
So sorry, the quadrants is the next step. So the first step is to do pairs. Sorry if that was, sorry, we started talking about the quadrants first, but and then I went back. But I would start with pairs, and then you're gonna take, then we're gonna start, so the two pairs together after that.
Okay. And then the pressing, I forget, I think you mentioned at this point, are they seams pressed, like you press them open or to one side? I forget now.
So generally in quilting, people do both things. I am a person who presses to one side. Okay. In patchwork. I think it's a little bit more stable when the seams are over to one side. And then some people, the people who press open oftentimes want to press open because they think they'll get a flatter block. And yes, that is true. So they'll press their seams open, so they'll get that sort of flat. They won't get that slight bulge of the double seam on one side, and that feels a bit more precise and flat for them. But what I don't like about that is then, you know, your threads are sort of just open to the back of the quilt in a way, and so it's just not as stable. Whereas if the seams are overlapping each other, and then, you know, you're sewing through that fabric, that's going to be a little bit more secure. So when we're sewing the blocks to each other, what I was saying is what we want to do is by row, you want to sew one row. So like the top row is going to go in one direction. So you're going to have all the, you just know when you're doing, your top row, it's going to, or your first row, they're all going to go, let's say, to the left, and then your second row will go to the right, and then your third row will go back to the left. So you're going to alternate the direction that the rows are seams are going in, so that when you put the pieces from the first row to the second row, those two seams are going to be going in opposite directions, and then that'll allow you to get that point, the intersection between those pairs, to sit right at each other, and you can pin them a little bit more closely. So rather than having if you had this two seams from the two blocks going in the same direction, it would be a little bit bulkier, and it won't sit as nicely. So having them going in opposite directions, you'll just see that they'll kind of like lock and nest together when you put those two blocks, when they put those two pairs together.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Mary, you had a question.
Yeah, what I am wondering as you're talking there, putting the pair, as I look at my squares and I put like a ruler on top, and I can kind of see, oh, it's really pretty good, 7.5 by 7.5. But there are some squares that are maybe a little bit, less than 7.5 or a little bit more, and not consistent down the length of the square. So I am curious how to approach that so that, yes, I'm going to end up kind of with straight / perpendicular, you know what I mean? Like as you add on to that.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to talk about this, like write it out, but I thought this is a better discussion. So trimming quilt blocks is a pretty common practice. What I always try to be mindful of is once you start trimming, you can kind of like not over trim, but you want to sort of stay, like if you put your ruler down on your 7.5 inch block, and it's basically 7.5 inches, but maybe like, I find that sometimes where the curved seam sort of joins, sometimes that's like a little bit wider, like that's where it gets stretched. I don't know if anyone noticed that on their block. So it's like the line may come down, then it kind of like boops out a little bit where the curve is. Now, I mean, you can start to trim that down a little bit, but if it's pretty consistent, you can, as you lay your blocks to each other, you can kind of like take, sort of almost like ignore that, but take the average. Like, I don't know if that makes sense. If it's definitely past the 7.5, you could just trim that little bit off. But what I like to do, if I can, is once you go down the rabbit hole of like doing a lot of trimming, you can sort of like over trim in a way, especially for something like this. So I try to like, if you're using a ruler, try to, I would trim really only things that are like over the 7.5 inches. So you're kind of keeping within that 7.5 inch square, and then you can kind of average things out a little bit, like in the way that you put them together. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I had a little less than 7.5, then I think I haven't pressed them yet. So I think that's going to give me that extra little bit.
Yeah.
And I feel I've been pretty consistent with my seams, thanks to Nadia, who enforced in me this scant quarter inch seam. And that's really, I just keep saying that, better to have that than, not, so better to err on that side. I guess I'll see as I go along, but that's my big panic, is like, oh my God, I'm going to need, like, kind of sewing straight lines is not my forte. So we'll see.
Hey. Yes, very curious. Did I answer your question, Mary? Sorry, we're good. Yeah. So it is better to err when you're sewing the blocks together. It is better to err on the side of having more block than less block. So having that scant 1/4 inch. I mean, theoretically, with this block, because it is just the one seam for every it is the one seam that we're sewing. Like, there's only the two pieces. So theoretically, if you're consistent through the whole project, like you're using the same seam allowance, same scanned, hopefully scanned 1/4 inch, but whatever 1/4 inch you're using, theoretically your block should be very similar to each other, if you're following that through the whole project. So that in a way is in our favor, because we don't have like 10 seams in our blocks. We have 1 seam in our block. So there's less chance for things to expand and contract with the multiple pieces, which I think can definitely happen. And then and it's very common in some, you know, for some quilts that you're making, you know, sometimes things like HSTs, which are just you know, those like sort of a square with like a diagonal line. Oftentimes those are sewn in, for some the way some people sew them is they purposely sew them with a lot of extra fabric, and then they trim them precisely to the size that you want them to be. So sometimes there are certain quilts or quilt blocks that people will sew purposely to have like a little extra, and then they'll kind of do a lot of trimming. They'll do a lot of trimming to actually get perfect final results for their blocks. So there's a few different ways to do that, but it's a lot of work trimming your blocks especially if you've got a lot of them down. Is anyone else noticing any wild differences between their block sizes, or are they feeling pretty consistent?
I found by using the ruler that I would get some blocks that were perfect. But then sometimes I was getting a block where one corner, and it was usually the corner with the curved edge, or with the 1/4 circle, like my nice Dora the Explorer monkey, because that's the only kind of placemat I could find at the dollar store. So I had to like fussy cut the monkey for my template. Yeah, the corner that had the 1/4 circle could be like really, really, like, it was really wonky, and it was like a lot. I couldn't get even like a 7 1/4 inch square. So but I find by using the templates, like I cut out the pattern, I found it much better. So I just found the ruler really awkward to cut. Like for me, I could not do it. So
well, thank you for lending it to Faye.
I hope, is it working out for you, Faye?
I absolutely love it.
Oh, that's great.
If it's not something you want, I will happily buy it off of you.
Oh, no problem. You can have it. It's fine. That's like so old.
It's working perfectly for me. I just didn't have the patience to trace and then cut. It was just one extra step.
Yeah. It is a lot. I've been putting it off. I only like got to pressing my fabrics yesterday and the day before. So I do. It's so much better though. I tried it a few different ways. I now have a because I like doing the walking foot like this. I had to trim the block itself down to 7 inches, so I now have a nice circle and a square. So I'm gonna practice. I think I'm gonna practice some walking foot quilting on it, because that's how I prefer to quilt. And yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Awesome.
Oh.
Heather McMillan, did you have?
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Hey, on my little squares here. And I have quite a few, but only about 20, I think. So, you know, I'm pressing them. I haven't actually measured them, so hopefully they're good.
Yeah.
And I did actually realize that I had I made the templates, remember, and I didn't realize that the template was in the back of the book to trace it. So anyway, I had made them, and I forgot to put the seam allowance on one of them, on the concave part. So that's why they weren't the right size. So anyway, I figured it out, thank goodness, before I got more done. So I only had to take 2 apart, but now I'm back on track. And yeah, and I'm getting faster at sewing them. So I'm feeling more confident with that.
That's great.
Yeah. So I don't think this will be finished by Christmas, but that is the goal. Maybe. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I feel like this is
these crafty things done in time.
Yes. It's a challenging time of year to prioritize your craft projects.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, speaking of timing, and how long, say, would it take to do the throw size? You know, if you're all set up with your walking foot and, you know, I see your quilt in the back. It's quite linear, huh?
Yeah, so this one is Catherine's, and this one was done on the long arm. So this was actually done on our long arm, and so was mine. And I think I think it probably took like maybe an hour. I want to say like 2 hours on the long arm.
Wow.
It's faster once it's set up, but I think depending on, it really just depends on the density and the complexity of what you're going to do, how long it will take you. But it is a process. It's definitely, you know, it might be multiple sessions depending on, how, how you want to break it up. But if you do something simple, you know, some sort of straight line that's sort of repeating, then I would say, you know, it's going to take you some hours, but for a throw size, it's not going to be too long. Because
like
also,
a couple of days.
Oh no.
Probably not that much. Yeah. If you put in a few hours, like I would say maybe 4-ish.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of a slow process. So you have to kind of like just allow it to take a little bit of time because, you know, you're moving a lot of stuff through your machine. And then you, depending on how you're doing it, you're like either marking or like, sort of creating, you want to create whatever kind of pattern you're creating for yourself. Like you may have in between, you know, sewing a row, then you may have to come back and like mark or adjust or do something unless you're doing something, you know, sometimes I'll do something simple. You know, some people will use like painter's tape. So if you were trying to do rows that were like a certain width, you could use painter's tape to like lay tape down. And so some people will tape down a line and then they'll, you know, sew that, peel the tape off, mark and tape down a second line. So there's a little bit of that like back and forth, unless you're doing something where you can, as Nadia was saying, like you've got a guide on your machine or you're using something that's very like, you know, the width of the presser foot or like, you know, something that's a little bit that's marked on your machine where you don't have to mark the quilt. You're just kind of following some sort of repetitive guide that you've set up for yourself, then that can go a little bit faster too.
Is there a basting process that happens first?
Oh gosh, basting, that's a whole other thing. Yeah, totally. So once your quilt top is done, and we can maybe talk about that in the last session.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go into yeah.
Okay.
For sure. Does anyone have any questions about putting the quilt top together, the assembly part, organizing things? No. Maybe a little bit of show and tell. I'm going to start putting people on the spot to show me how they're doing. Debbie, I'm going to start with you.
Karen.
Yes.
I am still, so because I'm ridiculous, I'm hand piecing all my blocks.
Did you say hand piecing your blocks?
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I heard you right.
So I have like a nice little pile of them already. I have been working on it like super consistently. I was like really like gung-ho at the beginning and then kind of slowed down. So I'm hand piecing everything.
Oh, great.
Yeah. I have some like super fun when I always add like, can you see the sparkles? No.
Hard to see, but pretty.
Anyway, I always add a little sparkle. So that's actually where I'm at. Just lots of hand stitching.
Well, that's inspiring.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it can, in some ways, it potentially could go faster because you can do it anywhere.
The thing too that I found, because I did machine piece a few blocks and my machine was being kind of weird. I don't know. I was having problems like just at the beginning, you know, when you sometimes get the little nests when you start stitching.
Yeah.
And so
Hi, Brian.
Hi.
We don't have any private.
Your coffee, ma'am.
Hi, guys. Anyway, we don't have any personal space in my house. It's all just everyone's in like within 5 feet of me.
Yeah,
anyway,
that's good.
Yeah.
So then I started hand stitching them and I was like, this is actually quicker than I thought. So it's not like it's taking forever. I'm just not able to dedicate tons of time to it every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Romina, I'm going to check with you since you and Debbie have shared fabric.
Yeah, I saw some of our twin fabric there. I would be almost done. This is what I have left to piece.
Oh, that's good.
Except there's like maybe 15 blocks that I've decided I don't want to make because they don't fit with the vibe.
Okay.
So I'm gonna have to cut up some more squares. But otherwise, my pile is looking pretty good.
Oh, that's so satisfying.
This one is really, really cute. I don't know if you can see it. These are both Debbie's fabrics. But it's going well. The only thing I think that's come up a few times is because we have like a variety of fabrics. Just like some of them are a bit more finicky. So I'm just doing more spray and more pins for those ones. But so far, so good.
Oh, that's good. Awesome. Roxanne, how's your stack coming along?
My stack is I'm still cutting.
Oh,
so I've pieced together 10 squares. But like right now I'm still cutting. I've got stacks that I've cut and stacks that I haven't cut. And to be candid, I have been so busy that the last time I worked on this was last Sunday morning, and it might be the next time I work on this is next Sunday morning. So, you know, it is what it is right now at this time of the year for me.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like for a lot of us, probably the project is going to go on into 2025, which is perfectly fine. And maybe we'll do a little meetup in January after the dust settles and check in and see how everyone's doing. And
I really loved Carol Ann's comment yesterday, and I reiterated it. Like, seriously, my husband gets a pattern and fabric wrapped up every year at Christmas because he's at the bottom of the list. And anyway, so yes, there's just lots to do personally as well as business at this time of year. Anyway, I'm still loving the process though. Just while I have the mic, I wanted to reiterate one thing that I think it was Mary said. I think it's really key, especially for people that this is their first quilt, to press before you trim. Make sure everything it's amazing how much pressing a square adds to the accuracy of it. And I think that was a really key point to reiterate before you start cutting it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely you want to make sure things are pressed out and as I said, be very careful with any trimming off that you might do.
Yeah, for sure.
Peggy, have you been with us before? Can we see how you're doing? I think we've got, you're still muted, Peggy. I'm just gonna. Well, they look really nice. I don't know if everyone can see. I can't hear you though, Peggy, if you're saying anything.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was muted there. Yeah, I've got them all done. So now I just have to start laying them out. And
can you show a few more?
What else? I don't know. There's lots of different colors here. It was started kind of with a fat quarter bundle that I had from many years ago, and then just kind of added a few things here and there. But got some reds and pinks and blacks, and
nice.
There's a little bit of gold metallic in some of them too, so should be fun coming together.
Awesome. Looks great.
Thanks.
Rosalind, you cutting?
Oh, hi. Sorry, I am cutting, but I'm just here to join the party. I'm just watching. I've cut just squares along. So I'm doing the Christmas like theme. So it's from this one because we like dogs. And then this one with the bee. And then this one with animals right now. But that's it. That's all I have.
Hey. And you have a helper.
And I have a looker.
Oh.
Just a looker. Right? Can you say hi to Karen? Hi.
Hi. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Laura? K? My eyes are fuzzy. I can't fully read. Laura K.
It's Lonnie.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I get called Laura. I get called a lot of things.
That's honestly, it's just, I don't have my glasses on. Everything is a blur.
I get it. So I had fun with the chain stitching and I got it all done.
Wow.
I have 2 squares I have to fix.
Okay.
I've been using, oh, here, I'll show you on one of these ones. I did a very bright palette. I think it was Peggy. She said she started with a set and then added to it. And that's what I've done. But for some of them, I've been actually using this side of the fabric, which is the wrong side.
That's nice.
Better.
Yeah.
Because the other one was just too dark for the palette.
Right.
And I just ended up sewing it the wrong way.
Oh, right.
I was going gung ho with the chain stitching. But yeah,
that's a good strategy though, using the reverse side. There's some batiks in there. Is that what they are?
Yeah, there's some batiks. There's some from my mom's fabric stash. Like
Amazing.
There's a little of everything.
That's awesome.
Just tried to keep with the brights.
It
But there
looks very colorful.
I do have some sort of pastel ones too, just for light ones. So we'll see how it works.
Great.
I'm not a huge quilter. I have a few quilts made. And again, they're sitting there without, the tops are made.
Okay.
So
yeah.
It's the quilting part that stalls me a lot. So.
Yeah. I've got a lot of this.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
First time I made it to this Zoom call.
Oh, well, thank you for joining.
I'm on the West Coast, so it's still in the dark here.
Yeah. Thank you for getting up early.
Thank you.
Janetta, you're busy. How's it going?
Hi there. Yeah, so I've got all my blocks sewn up, but like I do have the problems where it's like sort of like that.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I made like a little template of 7.5, and I was like, oh, maybe it all sort of sorts itself out.
Yeah.
When you put the blocks together.
Well, that's the thing is like,
being like,
yeah. I mean, for something like that, if you've got like a little thing, but like the rest of the line will line up, then you can just sew it, ignoring that in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. So that's what I was saying. It's like, if you don't have to trim, like you don't have to trim unless you have to trim. Like, if it's something that you can just kind of like visually ignore, you can kind of sew. Like sometimes if the block kind of one of your blocks is coming in, but the other one is straight, you can kind of just ignore that part, but line up the top and the bottom, and then just sew that sew your 1/4 inch straight through. Okay. So you can kind of like, yeah.
Great.
Yeah, sometimes that's better than like over trimming things down. So yeah, it's
and when you mark the blocks, like you've got them all laid out, is it sort of like row 1A? So it's 1A.
Yeah, I mean, you can come up with your
like that kind of thing.
Yeah, you can come up with your own system, but what I usually do is I do like row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then then like, or 1, 2, whatever, and then A, B, C. So it's like,
okay.
If I do
like
these are numbers and these are letters going one way. So I'll have like 1A, B, C.
Okay, thanks.
And then sometimes I'll put arrows too. Theoretically, you shouldn't need them if you can read, if your labels are stuck on correctly, but I feel like I've messed something up sometimes. So sometimes I'll put a little arrow. Or sometimes the pairing of the 2 letters and numbers might flip themselves. So I'll also use little arrows sometimes just as a little marker for what's up and what's down.
Okay, thanks.
No worries. Susan, you're knitting, but how's your quilt coming along?
I've just cut out all of my pieces. So mine's going to be a solid quilt.
Yeah.
So I was kind of inspired. I think it was Fern on one of the calls. She just kind of put her pieces randomly, and I'm just going to piece them randomly. And if I don't like a pairing, then I'll move on.
but I've been kind of reorganizing my apartment, and I'm trying to decide where to set up my sewing machine again. So once my sewing machine's set up, I'll start piecing.
Sweet. Yeah. Well, I think that'll be fun to see how those pairs come together randomly. I like that strategy. I think I've checked in with everyone, although there's one person whose name is iPad.
That would be me. I'm Tiziana. Hi, everybody.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I had shown my little mini version of the quilt last time, but I had so much fun that I know I won't have a lot of time in the near future, but I kind of steal some time every day and I cut a bit, I pin a bit, I just kind of do it in little bits, and it's been fun. I had some fabric that I really liked, like this is just one, and I really like the art gallery fabric, and I had a bunch of it, so I'm trying to stick to that weight and just use the fabric that I have to make it work. Like there's another one. So it's all there's a lot of florals, there's a lot of different types of prints, and as I'm making the individual blocks, I'm not sure that they'll all work together, but it's kind of the process that's interesting for me, seeing what'll work, what won't work, and somehow in the end it kind of does.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea of stealing time. I feel like it's amazing how just those little increments can add up really nicely. So it's a good way. I think that's for me. I'm always feeling like I don't have that time, but it really is just, even if you do spend 20 minutes, a half hour, that just collects, and you can actually get quite a bit done.
Yeah, I do some thinking, and I'm like, well, even if I do 2 blocks a day or 5 blocks a day, it kind of encourages you to not give up and say, I just don't have time. Like I just feel like and I enjoy it. So if I just steal a little bit of time, I might get 2 blocks in or 5 blocks in.
Yeah, that's smart. Okay, does anyone else have any questions before we break away? We're good. So next week, the workroom is at City of Craft in Toronto, and hopefully I'll see some of you there. So we won't do a meeting next week, but we can check in 2 weeks, and I will send a Zoom link for that on the middle of December 15th. Today's December 1st, which is wild. And so we can do a little check-in there. We can talk about, we'll see where everyone's at, and then I can talk about basting and quilting. And then I guess that's kind of our wrap up, although it's not wrapping up for most of us, which is fine. And maybe it'll be fun. We can do a sort of a New Year follow-up and check in after the craziness of the holidays, and keep each other going, getting us closer to the finish line as we keep stealing time. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Congratulations to wherever you're at in the process. They are all looking great. I'm so inspired by seeing, all the different versions, and it's amazing to just share the process with everyone, and especially our new quilters. I'm very, very proud of how you're doing. It feels really nice to see that. So reach out if you need anything within the next 2 weeks, but otherwise, hopefully I will see you next week in Toronto, or in 2 weeks on Zoom.
Thanks, Karen.
Okay.
Thanks.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.